Welcome. My kindest, sincerest regards to all of you. I think of you as my friends and my colleagues, and it's pretty nice to be with you again. The purpose of this meeting is to learn from each other. And I'm going to share what I know, what I'm up to, what my colleagues are up to. But it's also important that you share your knowledge, like we did this morning, getting to know each other, because in this audience, you actually are the people that really know. I know a lot about technology, or some about technology, but this idea that we can learn from each other, that's one of the main directions of this conference. You are part of a kind of global network, that's the way I think of it, that are each developing new methods, new ways of doing things, transforming your organizations, and that sort of thing. It's been our tradition at this conference to take a couple minutes and introduce yourself to one new person, somebody who you don't know, and so I'd like you to do that right now for me, please. Just turn around, tell them who you are, where you're from, why you're here, etc. That's good. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, that's good. That's fine. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much. Shh, shh. It's enough now. That's exactly what this meeting is supposed to be about, is meeting new people, building new bridges, creating understanding, sharing, learning, growing, all of those things. You're special in many ways. First off, through this experience of talking with each other, you now know that you're not exactly like everybody else here. You reflect different cultures and different disciplines, different ways of doing things, engineering and planning and forestry and etc. And that's what makes this such a rich conference. Also, this conference is not only about you, but it's also about spotlighting your work. And your work is clearly making a difference on the planet in almost every field of human endeavor. We also have a tradition here of starting off the conference by sharing some of the slides that you've shared and you'll be giving presentations on during the week about your work. Some of you are monitoring environmental change at many scales, the whole planet or regional change. And clearly the challenges that we're facing with things like global climate change or food shortage or water or related issues, nicely illustrated in these examples. Some of you are managing natural resources, from the forests to agriculture to water. And what I like about these examples is, for example, in Texas and also in South Sudan, we're seeing the same issues addressed using some of the same methodologies. Others of you are working on measuring and developing remedial action for environmental contamination. This beautiful 3D visualization map showing particulate deposition for me is one of my favorite examples here. But also on its right, this little measurement across the Pacific of plastic debris that's now floating in the ocean gives indication of what clearly is one of our major challenging issues today. Some of you are working on developing energy resources in a traditional way, oil and gas and oil shale. But also we're seeing a whole spectrum of new ways to generate energy through wind, solar, and also the distribution of that into electric cars. These examples show cadastral systems, the foundation of the civil society, from simple mapping to analytics, from field collection to beautiful visual displays. Others of you are working on creating the future. This is very exciting to me. The idea that GIS is a foundation for designing and planning, urban development, regional planning, not only on the land, but increasingly in the ocean. Transportation planning and management has been an old series of applications developed with GIS, and the modern version of that is shifting into real-time visualization and modeling, from bus routing to bicycle modeling. My favorite map here is the one in the Czech Republic showing public transit usage. Just a beautiful communicating map. We are changing the way we manage infrastructure, utilities and telecommunications, and public infrastructure. In these examples, we see the whole spectrum as well, from rural electrification in South Africa, rural areas, to intensive radio planning analysis, for example, in Lithuania. GIS is moving into micro scales, buildings, inside of buildings, routing inside of buildings, room management, space planning, and into ports and railroads and campuses. GIS is affecting business. Businesses, people are interested in getting the geographic advantage in where they locate their store, or the marketing advantage of typing populations. And here in Germany, we see some amazing examples of looking at engineering risk in the insurance space, or with down there the whole life cycle of moving their cars and insuring them, considering various sorts of risks. GIS is affecting how we understand human health, demographics, how we see social problems in new ways, like homeless population, and it goes on and on. GIS is affecting public safety. It's making our cities and our countries and our communities safer by being able to, in real time, do analytics and dispatch more effectively and more efficiently. We're even using it to look at where probably space debris is going to crash and plan accordingly. Talking about disasters, around the world today, GIS is used for visualizing and analyzing, responding to natural disasters and other human disasters, floods, for example, in Switzerland, hurricane impacts, ice storms, earthquakes, etc. GIS professionals are increasingly building platform systems for citizen engagement, both talking to them, but also receiving, through crowdsourcing information, instructions and feedback from citizens to make government a better organization. Transparency. And then there's mapping. Cartography continues to advance. Our colleagues in Switzerland with Swiss Topo, beautiful, for the first time generated an all-automated 1 to 25,000 scale map in Switzerland, the best cartography in the world. At the same time, the Dutch cadastre has developed a new system for completely automated generalization from 1 to 10,000 to 1 to 50,000, saving literally millions of euros and promising to shorten the cycle for this major event. Nautical charting, aeronautical displays, military cartography at NATO, all great examples. And now we're entering into a new era of story maps. I don't know how many of you have made these story maps, but they're online integration of maps, interactive maps with photography and text, telling stories about situations or about the future. We'll see a lot of this during the afternoon. Finally, we're seeing advancement in how we organize geographic information and make it available as services in portals for government and cities and business and also in the environment. Again, we'll see multiple real examples of this during the afternoon. I want to shift for a minute and talk about the vision of where GIS is going. What do we expect of it? This year we talked a lot about transformation. The simple meaning of transformation is change. So I'd like to say GIS is transforming our world. Perhaps that's wishful thinking now, but clearly your work of developing computational geography applications has had a huge footprint and effect already. But how about transforming it at a different scale? That's what I want to share with you my thoughts on, and then drill into technology and give you evidence that I think it's going to happen. Today, you and I are living in a world that's changing rapidly. It's also challenged. And I don't know about you, but for me, I'm frankly very worried about the future. I mean, I look at my government shut down, totally unresponsive, can't even figure out the budget. But if we look at it at the global level, who's really thinking in an integrated way about our future? And clearly the issues will demand that we develop collaborative approaches to begin planning out 50 years or 100 years from now what we want it like. It's not going to evolve well if we don't step up on the table and look at it in a more contextual way. Do you agree? We need to take our best science, we need to take our best technology, we need to take our best design thinking, we need to take all of those and begin to think about and then execute on creating a better and more sustainable future. Your work, as I showed already, is having an effect. It's clearly helping us understand our world. And understanding is the key for action. One of my good friends says, understanding precedes action, or at least it should. The medium that we're working with is very interesting because it's visual. You know this better than I. It's quantitative and analytic. It's systematic. And it's also comprehensive. It can bring all of the ologies together, all of the parts of departments, all the different organizations together in a more holistic approach. In this sense, GIS is a very practical means, and your work again demonstrates it often in specific domains and specific geographies. It's a very practical means for making this kind of transformation, for bringing it all together. And clearly your work has already changed how we think and how we perceive, how we act in many cases. Your work is driving more efficiency or driving better decision making. I know this from you. I see the evidence. My question is, can we scale it up? If we already know that this technology, your work, helps us organize how we measure and how we predict and how we plan and how we design this whole workflow of activities, how we make decisions, how we manage. If we know that this is a tool that can do these things, how can we scale it up? When I've been thinking about this, there are other technologies that scaled up. For example, GPS on my device, if I can find it, I'm no longer lost anymore. I can go any place in the world and I know where I'm at. I had trouble with a taxi driver last night because he didn't know where he was at, but I could find my way, right? That's an example of satellite and remotely sensed information and device computing all integrated so I don't lose my way anymore. Yet, clearly, the world is lost. Or otherwise we wouldn't have these challenges that we're facing. How can we move GIS to that same scale of pervasiveness? That's a very interesting thought. How can we take the same principles of integration and systematic thinking and scale it out, affecting virtually all of our organizations and all that we do? Now, it turns out that GIS is going through a major transformation exactly like the rest of the world. It's being affected by amazing technologies, the cloud, devices, much faster computing, the web itself. It's also integrating all kinds of data, advanced measurement data like LiDAR and 3D information, GPS and imagery. It's all going into a new pattern that I like to call web GIS. And emerging out the other side are simple, easy-to-use apps that make maps and can also do analytics and become pervasive. So in trying to wake up the world to the power of your work, it turns out this pattern is starting to emerge that at least gives me positive thoughts that we could take on those challenges. This WebGIS supports two communities, and it's useful to make this distinction. One community is the traditional geospatial GIS, geocentric community of planning and facility management and forest management, and probably most of you in this room are in that community. But this new WebGIS that I want to talk about also supports another kind of pattern. Let's just call it the location platform pattern, where we extend the power of simple mapping and analytics and support for open developers to a new class of community. We empower the entire enterprise. These are interrelated, and we'll see in a moment just how interrelated they are, but they represent two communities, both of which are very excited about this evolution. Let's go a little deeper into what WebGIS is constituted from. First, it represents a new kind of framework for integrating virtually all data types, traditional data like maps or imagery or web services, but also tabular data like spreadsheets or big Oracle databases. It's also integrating through web maps and web services social data, social media data, Twitter feeds, and also real-time sensor networks. And finally, the immense new powerful analytics of big data. This is being integrated through web services and also a new data type, that's all that I can say to describe it, that we're calling a web map, a new medium that abstracts and allows integration of this rich, diverse media set of geospatial data. Now, this WebGIS provides us a new platform for data integration. Almost everybody in this room is familiar with a geodatabase, where we take a DBMS and we pour the data into it. We have to normalize the data into different layers. Most of you have done that. And while that's very good and does not go away, there is yet another pattern for integration. And this is a key point, which is dynamic integration of distributed services, where stovepipes of data can remain in place, and through this medium of web maps and web services can be brought together, which is distinct and different from having to do all the work of normalizing all the data and putting it into a single database. You see this distinction? And this kind of framework means that we have a much more agile way to implement visions of enterprise-wide or organization-wide or SDI kinds of implementations. It means that we don't have to all agree on one data model or put all of our data in one database. We can federate it, but yet bring it together and use it in GIS settings. So this web GIS pattern can allow us to integrate anything. I can do it through dynamic linking. This is a 1990s technology, hyperlinks. I can take a map and I can link it to documents and pictures and text. That's old school. We did it in ArcView 1, right? The second pattern is visual overlay. That's mashups. Okay, we can do that. We do it on Google, we do it on Bing. That's a pretty simple visual integration. The third pattern is new, which is I can take distributed services and bring them together and do analytics. That's interesting. That's really interesting. And we're going to see some examples of that this morning. In other words, the power of GIS implemented in another architecture. Now, this architecture also has implications for organizations. It means that the traditional barriers that separated us based on ologies like geology, archaeology, sociology, climatology can be dynamically brought together. Or the planning department versus the engineering department versus the water department can be brought together using this new medium without a lot of pain. So this pattern, I guess what I want you to get across, what I want to get across is it's a new pattern for realizing GIS at a lot larger scale. And organizations are starting to implement this. The little American flag there is the symbol of one called NISC, which is about emergency response. In my country, we have FEMA, a national agency. We have state agencies for responding. We have police and fire at the local levels. We have private security firms. In Katrina, a hurricane that happened about 10 years ago, it was a mess. The hurricane ruined everything, but even a bigger mess was nobody collaborated on information. We had no situation awareness. In contrast, this organization, coordinated by the federal government, implemented a WebGIS pattern. And in Hurricane Sandy last spring, last fall, it was a very different story because we had situation awareness by people sharing their up-to-date information in real time. And there was real collaboration. It's just an amazing story. So I'm very encouraged by this pattern because I'm seeing it again and again and again and again at all different kinds of scales and all kinds of organizations.